Hey, what's up? Your friend Susan here. How are you doing, Raw and Real Entrepreneurs? I hope you are having an amazing, amazing day. I have a question for you. Do you have a full-time job right now and you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, or do you know someone who keeps talking about being an entrepreneur and has a full-time job? Yeah, if that's you, or you have a friend who's in that situation, like a lot of people are, this is your episode. I'm going to be talking to an amazing founder and CEO who left a government job and to go full time, build a business, and with no entrepreneurial experience. So we're going to have that conversation. And I will tell you, they're absolutely rock star amazing. The question I have around entrepreneurship is why aren't you? Why aren't you taking the leap? And it ultimately comes down to courage, resilience, readiness, your mental health, your physical health, setting yourself up for success financially. And at the end of the day, the most valuable commodity we all have is our physical health. Because when we are healthy, and I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, when we're healthy, we can do anything. And so you might be wondering, Susan, what are you doing these days to take care of your health? And I've had a lot of friends notice, oh my gosh, Susan, you look incredible. You weigh less than you did a few years ago. And I'm actually eating more and I am working out less. I used to be a professional Ironman distance triathlete. I used to work out a ton. And what it's ultimately come down to is me using the Pause app, Harmony by the Pause. And this is the app that Dr. Mia Chorney and I have created. And I'm tracking my symptoms every single day. So I'm tracking my mood. I am tracking my perimenopause, menopause symptoms. I'm tracking my sleep and I'm engaging with Harmony. And she's noticing, hey, Susan, normally your mood is unstoppable. What's going on? That's not what's going on today. Maybe today is a good day for a rest day. She's making suggestions. And we're constantly adding new features to the app. We do a new release almost every single week. And we are a female founded company and we won't sell your data. So as you're tracking, that data is yours and it's for your experience. So I would encourage you to check out the Pause app, and that is in the App Store and the Play Store. And we have a 7-day free trial. Check it out, female founded. And we also have an incredible Facebook group. So if you or someone you love is going through perimenopause or menopause, check it out. That group is thousands and thousands, and it's growing every single day. And Dr. Mia and I go in there, we answer your questions. It's incredible. So check it out. Find out more at www.thepause.ai. The other thing that I have been doing for my health for a very, very, very long time is, of course, detoxing once a week. And for over 20 years, I have used the Ice Giants cleanse. It is clinically proven to remove certain toxins from the body. It has been studied and researched. It's absolutely amazing. And you can go to my website, susansly.com/trusted partners and find out more. And I would encourage you to do that. So the Ice Giants cleanse absolutely changed my life. I've been traveling. I just got back from the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I was speaking in Davos on agentic AI, and I'm constantly on the road. And with the new movie, the M Factor 2.0, Before the Pause, which I am in, talking about women's health and artificial intelligence, I'm traveling to all these different movie screenings. That's how I stay healthy. I do a 1 day a week reset, and it's not about your weight, it's about your health. So check it out, www.susansly.com/trusted partners. So this founder that I am going to talk to is amazing. She was working in the Navy and she was in finance and very stable job and had never been an entrepreneur. And she started to really think about, with some feedback, what could be possible for her. And it turned out that she had a talent for home staging. And so she went from an idea to the courage to say, hey, I have this PTO, so I'm going to take off Fridays. I'm going to literally start knocking on doors and see if there's anyone interested in this business. And when she went full time, the business became profitable very quickly, within months. And during the early years of this company, she also went through a divorce. Her children were 2 and 3, her little girls. And she is, of the hundreds of founders that I have interviewed, this person who has an incredible mindset. She's resilient. And in this episode, we're going to talk about challenges with scaling quickly. We're going to talk about the courage to leave a job and become a full-time entrepreneur with no entrepreneurial background. We're going to talk about the decision to franchise a business because that was something that she did as she grew the company. And what happens when you are needing a solution that doesn't exist and how to actually build your own technology. She's phenomenal. And so I invite you to enjoy, to learn, and to share, and to give a 5-star review to my sit down chat with the amazing Alisa Sparks, the founder and CEO of Linden Creek.
This is Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that brings the no-nonsense truth of what is required to start, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Susan Sly.
Alisa, my friend, fellow mom of 4, we were having the best conversation before the show, and it's like, oh my gosh, let's do a show. One of the questions I ask every entrepreneur in the hundreds and hundreds of interviews I've done, because I kind of, Alisa, am doing this straw poll. Are entrepreneurs born? Are they made? So your first business, what was it?
My first business was actually Linden Creek, which is the business that I still have today. I know I've gotten to listen to some of your episodes, and most of your entrepreneurs have the story of when I was a kid, I was, selling this at school or had the lemonade stand. My story isn't like that. I grew up in a family where entrepreneurship just wasn't a part of the conversation. You get your steady 9 to 5 job, you grow and you go up the corporate ladder, and one day you retire with your pension or your 401k. And so the fact that somewhere along that career path, I paused and went, maybe entrepreneurship is something that I want to be part of, sort of was this really unique shift for what my family was used to seeing, and a mindset that really changed for me as I grew older.
That, and thank you for saying that because so many people, and we were having this conversation, think, oh, I didn't have a lemonade stand, or I didn't sell rattlesnakes like Gregory Shepherd did, or whatever it was, the watermelon sales, or whatever, selling candy and having that side hustle. And my philosophy has been that anyone can learn a skill, but they can't learn heart, and character has to be developed. You had this stable career, managing naval aircraft budgets. And as a sidebar, my husband, he was managing budgets for a joint base in Afghanistan between the US and Canadian government. So I know how big those budgets are. And you said, I'm going to leave this and do something so much less predictable. So how long did it take to sort of say, I have this idea, there's this little thread that I'm pulling on, to actually saying, I'm going to go for it? Because that's what people want to know, that because everyone's thinking, I want to start a business, but very few people actually do.
Yeah, and I will say honestly, in that transition season, I had a lot of doubt that it was going to be successful or that I knew what I was doing, because I didn't necessarily have this great playbook. So I worked for the Navy for nearly a decade managing budgets. And during that season, I loved doing creative things. So I would study magazines and beautiful pictures of homes and think about why and how they worked. And then I would renovate houses in my free time and flip them or build furniture in my garage just to fulfill this creative itch. And I remember there was this day I was at the gym and I'm running on the treadmill and I'm listening to the Rich Dad Poor Dad audiobook. And he's talking about the importance of really building something beyond just your W-2. And it was this moment for me of maybe I should think about entrepreneurship. Maybe I should think about starting a business, but I would love it to be in design, but I don't have the design degree, so that can't be it. But what could this really look like? And as I was exploring this, we had one of our properties for sale, and the feedback on it was the staging is really good. And I thought, I don't need a degree to stage houses. Maybe I can start this part time. We'll see where it goes. We'll test the concept. And so I kept my full time job. I started building business plans and SOPs and kind of figuring out what I thought I was going to provide. And I would take my Fridays off. I would take PTO And I would knock on as many doors as possible of real estate agents and home builders just to see if the market opportunity was really there. I figured the safest way to test something crazy like this isn't just like jumping and not having a stable income, but keeping my stable income and really building proof of concept. And in about 4 months, found myself in a position where I had to make that decision of business is growing. Do I jump and I go all in now, or do I stay back in my previous position? And I think, honestly, people thought I was a little crazy. I remember my managers at the time in the Navy, they were like, hey, if this doesn't work out, come on back. We got you. Don't worry about it. And I thought, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I've got to find a way to make this work. And so I made that jump. And I think when you reframe your mind of like, failure just isn't an option, we have to figure this out. We might get punched a few times, but we're just going to keep plowing through it. It changes that perception and you figure it out.
Alisa, I had this image. I don't know if you saw the Vince Vaughn movie Nona's, where
No.
no, so he basically decides to open a restaurant, but he's working full time for the transit authority, and he's sneaking off and doing all of the restaurant stuff like on the side. And I had this vision of you using your PTO, but being very covert about it. So how did you have that conversation with your colleagues that this was something you were going to explore?
I think it just came down to, well, let me say, when you work for the government and the Department of Defense, no one starts their own business. Like they are in it for the long haul because of all the great benefits and retirement opportunities and things like that. So this was certainly an anomaly and not something people normally do. But I think they saw and understood that I was excited and passionate about something. I think a lot of people saw it as me choosing to pursue a hobby that I was passionate about in design. And so changing my industry was maybe important. And a lot of people, they were like, that's really great. Good luck. But I think they scratched their heads and went, you're leaving something that makes so much more sense, that's stable, that's this beautiful income. And even a couple years in, as I was still getting my feet under me, I sat down with a former colleague of mine and she looked at me and she said, you know how much money you'd be making had you stayed here? Do you know the opportunities and the promotions that you would have received? Like, do you think you made the right decision? And I remember thinking, I was still reinvesting in the business. I wasn't making the money that I could have been making over there. And I remember thinking, I still feel confident that this was the right journey for me.
Oh, that confidence, it because the number one reason startups fail is cash flow, right?
Yep.
I have a Vanguard opinion that that's not the number one reason startups fail because money is abundant, and especially I know Robert Kiyosaki. I've done speaking events with Robert and Kim, and that there's always money out there, but it comes down to the founder. It comes down to the founder grit, the integrity. And what was the first hard lesson for you? Right? So 4 months, you're making the decision and you're going all in, but you also knew you could go back to the Navy, right? And things are different now. We talk about, and especially women of our generation being in similar ages, we talk about stability, but stability isn't what is current now. Nothing is really stable. But back then it was like, yeah, I could go back to this. But what was the first tough thing that you faced that caused you to maybe not necessarily question, but maybe just feel like, oh, am I on the right path or not?
Yeah, interestingly enough, when I started the business, my biggest fear was I'm not going to find any customers. No one's going to come and say, Alisa, come hire me for these services. And that wasn't the case. We grew really rapidly and we found an opportunity to really niche ourselves into a market that was underserved. But what came from that was very natural organic growth. In our industry, every time we stage a house, it's actually us marketing our services to every other agent that's walking that property. And so the growth that we saw was very fast, which is a beautiful thing for a business. And you think that that's a win. But in this industry specifically, it requires inventory. And so I found myself in a really challenging position early on where we were growing at such an exponential rate that it was this cash challenge of where does the money come from? How do we say know when to say yes? How do I know when to say no? I could 10x my business tomorrow, but do I have the capital for that? And how do we execute that? And it was very interesting as you're like growing this successful business and everybody wants you and it's everything you've ever dreamed of. And you look at your bank account and you're like, but that does not reflect this. And how do we support the needs that are really happening and growing? And that was that first moment where I went, I didn't see this in the cards. I thought entrepreneurship, I thought we'll slowly work on building our client base, but I never thought what happens if you grow so fast that now you have these challenges around capital and around, how quickly can you staff and get somebody trained up and the uniqueness that happens in growth that oftentimes is just as challenging and painful as those slower seasons. And that was a trying time of, okay, like we're in. So either you jump ship and say, just kidding, or we double down and we go, let's figure this out.
So how did you figure it out? Where did you get the capital to scale?
Yeah, I decided to continue bootstrapping. There, of course, are opportunities to find funding solutions, whether it is lending or it's investors. For me, I wanted to have full ownership because I wanted the ability to make decisions on when to put my foot on the gas and when to put it on the brake. In that season, I had two little girls that were 3 and 4, and my greatest fear is if somebody else came in, they would say, hey, you being in the carpool line and picking kids up in the afternoon is a non-negotiable. And I didn't want to lose that. And so I just decided I needed to figure it out. And so for me, it really came down to more of a let me revisit pricing. Maybe if there's this much demand, do we need to raise our prices? So some of that happened. Some of it came around revisiting how quickly we could cash flow different assets, what inventory and furniture was working better than others. And so really analyzing that so I could buy smarter. Some of it came around recognizing that it was okay for me to say no to a client until I had the capital to really execute a project the right way. And so it was a combination of different things. And we grew slower because I decided to take that approach. But that slower growth allowed me to really analyze and learn from every single project and do the next one better.
The what I'm dying to ask you, because I've been in a situation in another company that I helped build where I was like hiring like crazy. And I did things that I wouldn't do now. I would look at the references, I would do the 3 interviews and I do all that stuff. But now I give people a trial period before I make them an offer. There's a whole host of things. Did you ever make bad hires? And if so, how has your hiring ethos changed?
Yeah, I've absolutely made bad hires. And I'd love to say, like, I never make bad hires now, but I still make bad hires at times. We've gotten far more aggressive in the hiring process and the interviewing process. So, yes, we do, culture fit. Do you have the technical skills? But also anything that we can do to give them sample projects or get them in the field with my team so that my team can provide feedback. Because oftentimes they're going to look and speak differently to my employees than they are to myself. And so we really like to bring those elements in. But I think the other thing that's been interesting is as my business has scaled over the last 8 years, the person that I would have hired that was an A player on year one looks very different than the A player that I want to hire today. There's a different skill set that happens. The vision and the mission of who Linden Creek is and where we want to go has gotten so much bigger that there is space now for even more qualified hires to come in and build and grow that need to have different skill sets than they used to. And so some of this journey has been learning how to hire better, but some of this journey has been learning and recognizing that who we were on year one is different than who we were on year five, which is different than who we are today. And preparing and planning for that new hire that is going to allow our business to grow. Because in this season, if everything hinges on me and my decisions, we're all in trouble. We're too big for that. And so I need heavy hitters that are really analyzing who the business is and how it can grow and finding ways to optimize who we truly are.
The do you If you had to weight one as being more important than the other, which is more important, skills or cultural fit?
Culture fit through and through. Skills are important, don't get me wrong, but I think oftentimes it's easier to teach skills. It's so much harder to teach culture, and get somebody that truly believes the way that you believe and has the same values. In our company, we actually just had an interview a couple months ago with somebody. We made a wrong hire. Lovely person, just not the right fit. And so in the second interview round, I just said, you know what? I'm going to be totally transparent. Like, this is who we are. We are hustlers. We are crazy people that 8 o'clock at night are still thinking about work, not because I tell you to, but because you can't help it. We're people that like get excited and innovate on a Saturday because it's just in our blood and we want to make this impact. And I was really transparent about who we were. And I said, we're kind of a little bit psycho. And I was like, if either that turns her away and that's okay, or she's going to be like, that is in alignment. And she loved it. She's like, I'm a little bit psycho. This is perfect. And I've heard her say that to a couple of our employees internally since. But because I was so transparent about who we are and what our
Mhm.
culture is, I was better able to find somebody that actually fit with it. And not that this is right and a different version of somebody else is wrong. It's just this is who we are in this season. And so we need other people that have those similar traits and qualities. And there are other cultures and other businesses that are going to be beautiful for other individuals as well.
What's the hardest fire you've had to do?
The hardest fire was a dear friend of mine, that, of course, became a friend throughout the years, that was with me early on in the business. She was one of my first hires. I had her for years, but as our business grew from look at us, little Raleigh, to we're going to scale to a national brand and franchising, and there are a lot of people in it and a lot of moving parts. She loved that small, intimate, small business sort of approach. And the tension started to build as we kind of pivot into this new version of who we were. And so the conflict and the tension started. And that became one of those decisions of you're looking for who we used to be, and those businesses are still out there, but you've got to find that and are not necessarily ready to go with where we're going with our business tomorrow.
That's so hard. I know. I've lived that and it's really, really hard. And so what has changed for you? And especially as women, we're often more empathetic, right? And we're moms. So what has changed for you in terms of taking a longer time to let someone go versus who you are now as a CEO of like, let's face it, it is a rapidly growing company. And we're going to talk about the decision to franchise versus expand in other ways. But how have you changed, Alisa, as a person, as the person who can fire quickly? Because it's not an easy transition. A lot of people can't do it.
Yeah, it's really not. But I think I've started to take the same philosophy that I did when we think about people saying no. So, there's always these conversations around you should say no, because if you don't say no to an opportunity or to something, you're actually saying no to something else. And so the way that I see it with the firing piece of it is I have a team of amazing A players. And so if I have somebody else on the team that's maybe not the A player that we need, I'm actually challenging everybody else on my team, and preventing them from being wildly successful, or I'm frustrating them. And the last thing I want to do is frustrate them and lose them because they're adding so much value. And so I see it more as me choosing to fire somebody is less that I don't, it's not that I don't care about them because I do. And it's really easy to like sit and think about the decision that you're about to make is going to impact them personally and their family, and you can go down that line. But I also recognize that I am responsible for who our organization is and the other individuals that are in it and the clients that are part of it. And if I don't make that decision, I'm doing a disservice and I'm not protecting the people that I need to be protecting. I'm not helping them be established and successful. And when I reframe it that way, it allows me to recognize that yes, this firing over here is a tough decision, but if I don't make it, everybody else is going to suffer. And that's not being responsible as a CEO.
Absolutely. And that one person who, whether it's absenteeism, presenteeism, underperforming, not a cultural fit, it's amazing how they drag down the entire organization. And then when they're gone, I know for myself, I've gone, why did I wait so long? Right.
Yes.
And I do. And it's very easy in those pockets of my life to go, but they have a family and but if it only takes one person to be a detriment to an entire organization. One of the things you and I discussed, and you mentioned it, the girls being little. And you were quoted as saying, I needed to be in the carpool line. And we even, you just talked about that between 2:30 and 5. And as a mom, mom guilt is real.
Yeah.
And it's because there's so many reasons, right? It's how we look at ourselves, it's how we show up in the world, it's how our kids are giving us feedback. And you said, I wanted to retain that control. I didn't want anyone really questioning, like, this is where I'm going to be. And so, my question for you is, how did you navigate building a company and having two really young girls? And I know when they're that age and they're so snuggly and they want mama and they have days when they're sick and they have recitals and they have all sorts of things. How did you juggle all of that?
Yeah, what's interesting is I started the business, and a year in, my first husband and I got a divorce. We separated, and we're amicable, but that was not in the plans. And so here I was with this fast-growing business that needed a lot of cash as a single mom of two little girls, and we had just moved to the new city of Raleigh a year prior, and so I didn't have any family close by. I didn't have anybody I could necessarily trust to take on those responsibilities. So it was a little bit of a like, we're just going to figure this out. And that was what I did. But what was interesting is during that season, it forced me to delegate and to train and teach my team probably so much faster than had I had the option of working in my physical warehouse 80 hours a week. I would have done it just to save $10. And the reality is, by training up my team that quickly, and coaching them and being forced to rely on them, it allowed me to scale at a much faster rate and actually delegate to the level we're at today even. And that wouldn't have happened had the girls, had the flexibility to not necessarily be what I felt like was a little bit of a time constraint at that point. But what's interesting is, as we were building and developing Linden Creek, you have this mom guilt is a very real thing. I can't tell you how many times it would be, potential evenings where for a couple hours I'm still juggling and handling emails while they're awake. Or we spent a Saturday, in the warehouse handling logistical things or packing or unpacking. And I'm like, they're here in a warehouse on a Saturday instead of spending their Saturday, going on swings in the yard. And I'm like, I'm the worst mom in the world, is what I'm thinking. And it's interesting because fast forward today, they go back and they're like, Mom, remember when we used to go to your warehouse on Saturdays and we would like take the teacups out and we'd have tea parties and we'd hide and we'd play hide and go seek. And that was so much fun. And I'm like, everything that I told myself in that season was like, I'm torturing my children because they have to be part of this journey. And they look back at that as fond memories. And it's interesting too, because, they're in the car oftentimes and I'm taking a client call or I'm taking a call or a conversation with an employee. And I'm like, sorry, girls, pause, let me just handle this call. But they now understand things about employee relationships, about leadership, about client interactions and client service that I never had an understanding of because they just are around it and absorbing it. And so there are these little business entrepreneurs that are starting their own businesses at a young age and loving it and talking through marketing strategies with me for fun and geeking out over it because it's almost become a love language for us. Like, we all enjoy it. We get excited, we get invigorated. And so it's become a fun pastime that I think they would have never been exposed to had I not started Linden Creek. And so I'm thankful for it now. But I say that to say to all those moms out there that feel the mom guilt. It is a real thing, and it's something I still struggle with. But I will say, coming out on the other side of these girls being older now, they're 11 and 12, and them reflecting on the journey, going, yeah, mom worked really hard, but look at what she has. And yeah, mom worked really hard, but I know all of these things that I didn't know before, that you're probably not doing a disservice to your kids. You're probably serving them in a really beautiful way.
Absolutely. So well said, Alisa, because it's an education for them and it's helping them become resourceful and giving them different skills. I've taken my children on so many business trips. They've been in business meetings. They fully understand how to network, how to look someone in the eye, shake their hand. And as you were sharing, I was thinking every parent knows that what I'm about to say. So let's say it's Christmas and it's, the baby's first Christmas. The baby is maybe not quite a year old and we want it perfect. And we go buy the toys. What
Yeah.
does the child always play with? We all know the answer. The wrapping paper, the
Yeah.
box, right? And your girls with the teacups playing tea party, playing hide and seek,
Yeah.
and those memories for them, because that was the environment they created in the situation, right? And we
Yeah.
tell ourselves stories about what an environment is, and oftentimes they're very different than the reality that we get to create. I want to know, when did you actually start to be able to pay yourself, like to be able to go, oh, I can pay myself a salary now. How long was that?
We did enough to get by those first probably 2 and 2.5 years. And I actually sat down with another business owner. I think that's been one of my favorite things this journey is like the more business owners I can connect with and build relationship with, the better because you can learn from them all. But I sat down with one of them and we kind of were just sharing numbers and sharing our growth. And he said, at what point are you going to pay yourself more than just the bare bones? And I was like, well, I don't really need more than the bare bones. It's fine. I can keep reinvesting. And he's like, yes, but are you going to notice if just a few $1,000s more ends up in your bank account every month? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't notice. And he's like, so then you do it. You start paying yourself because at some point in time, you need to reap the rewards. At some point in time, you need assets and investments and opportunities that are outside of just the business. And that was really valuable advice for me at that time because I think I was in that mindset of like, I'm just going to suffer forever and I'm just going to keep reinvesting every penny. But there comes a point in an entrepreneur's journey where you have to pause and go, it's okay for me to reap some of the rewards and the benefits. It's okay for me to live in a situation where I'm really excited about my compensation and I'm excited about the benefits of all of the reinvestment. And so, where that time is in your journey really depends, I suppose, on the business and it depends on you. But as silly as it sounds, that was the biggest challenge is being okay with not reinvesting every single penny back into it at a season and going, it's okay to bring some of this home and truly enjoy the fruits of the labor.
Awesome. So the business was profitable then at
Yes.
that point. Yeah. And that's
Yes.
the key because there are, like in the tech world, you may go a very long time without the business being profitable. But at some point, founder fatigue is very, very real. And you lose the motivation if you're not paying yourself. And that would be my advice to anyone listening who's in that situation. And I've been in that situation before where you're not paying yourself and there's only so long you can go before you say like, why am I doing this, right? And so
Yeah.
if you're going on and not paying yourself, then that's about how your business is working. How long before from the time you started to the business became profitable?
We were profitable, truthfully, the first few months in. So it didn't take long to see a position where our cash flow was positive, where every month we were bringing more money home. It just came down to the question of how quickly do we scale? We had the opportunity to keep reinvesting. And so the conversation always then became, where do you reinvest? Where do you pause? Where do you reinvest? Where do you pause? And that answer changed, on a month-to-month basis as I re-examined our goals and things of that nature as well.
So that to have a business that becomes profitable that quickly, you have a lot of different opportunities. So you can grow it, retain control. You could sell it essentially. There's different things. You had the opportunity as well to perhaps branch off and do different things with Linden Creek, with the brand, creating CPG products, creating, investing really. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
You decided to franchise. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So I told you I got really good at hiring somebody to help me in that carpool lane, right? But what was interesting is about 5 years into the business, I remember it was Memorial Weekend and I was sitting on my couch reflecting on my week prior. And I was like, that's odd. No one needed me to do anything last week. Like they were all running the day to day, they were running the sales. My team was happy, my customers were happy. Like no one needed me for anything. And I looked at my week ahead and I was like, that's interesting. I could not show up any day next week and nothing's going to change. Like they've got it. I have accidentally worked myself out of a job. And usually that's the like, I made it. This is amazing. But I was like, I love working. What did I just do? That was not the goal. And so I sort of panicked and talked to another business owner friend of mine and was like, this is so bizarre. What do I do with this? And as this is happening, was getting these messages on Instagram from other home stagers, other interior designers asking questions about, hey, how do you store your mattresses in the best way that they don't take up as much space? How do you keep your art in the warehouse so it doesn't get scratched? How do you handle pricing objections? Like all of these different things where I thought, that's interesting. We have systems for all of that. We have answers for that. And this is an industry where oftentimes people come here because they love the industry. And so it's a hobby that maybe pays for itself rather than a business that really is run like a business. And I watched too often that entrepreneurs in this industry were closing their doors 3 years later because they weren't thinking like a business. They were thinking like a designer or a decorator. And I thought, how interesting that we have like unintentionally really built all of these systems and this structure so that I could have the flexibility that other people are looking for. And I loved my life. I loved how much money I was making. I loved the services we were providing. I loved every ounce of it. And I thought, if there's a way to get this opportunity to other people, that's what needs to be next. And so, as I was trying to figure out what that looked like, my friend said, hey, I have a franchise in a totally different business. He's like, you could franchise this. And I thought, no, I can't. It's a creative space. You can like franchising is for systems. You can't franchise this. And I was clearly wrong, but it made me think about things. And so I went to a franchise attorney and I said, listen, can I franchise interior design? Like, is this even an opportunity? And he asked me some questions and we talked through the systems I had. And and he said, well, could I buy your franchise and design? I said, well, yeah, because we have this system here, we have these floor plans here, you utilize these brand standards. You could design a space that looks just like mine next week. And he's like, then you have a franchise opportunity, Alisa. And I went, huh, I guess I do. And that was really what started the journey. I got excited about franchising because I could have provided education, but I loved the idea of the long-term relationship that came out of franchising. I loved the fact that we could build a relationship with our owners and support them not just in this season while they're paying for a coaching service, but for the next 10 years of their journey because they're going to need different things at each stage. And we have been there and experienced that pain, and I get what it's like. And if I can be there to be a positive ear or to protect them from a painful turn that I've made, then I want to be able to do that. And so that's really what made me decide to franchise this.
When I was researching you, I thought that was so interesting because like you, I was like, huh, right? And I have had many franchise experts on the show, and they're like, you can actually franchise anything, Susan. Like you can. There's always a way, to your point, if there's systems, if there's some kind of SOP, there it's franchisable. So I I have a question for you. You are
Sure.
like this ray of light. It's like, okay, I'm finding the positive, I'm finding the upside. You either were born from a family that way or you've really trained yourself to be that way. And so which is it?
I think it's a combination of the two. My mother is very optimistic. My grandmother would always, I remember we'd like pull into her garage when she'd get home and she'd say, thank you, Jesus, that we made it here safely. It's just
Yeah.
the simplest little things we were grateful for. So I definitely grew up in that upbringing. But there was this season where my life was not a pretty version. I didn't love my career at the time. I didn't love a lot of aspects, and there were pain points and there were really real challenges. And so I think coming out of the other side of it, all I can look and go, this is the most amazing, beautiful thing that I've ever seen because I know what the alternative can be. And this brings me joy. So I think it's a combination of the two. I think when you go through something really challenging, everything else feels like a cakewalk. And sometimes I even reflect on my Linden Creek journey and I'm like, that was really hard, that thing that I did back there. But it didn't feel hard at the time. I was just so grateful for the opportunity. That joy really has become a big part of, I guess, who I am today.
What is that process for you? Because as founders, there are things we are going to face. There's, potential lawsuits, there are employee issues, delivery issues, there are ice storms, there are also, there's no end of everything.
Yeah.
When something happens, I've always referred to them as WKMs, wall kicking moments. What
Yeah.
is your process to keep you grounded? Because as founders, as CEOs, it's so important for us to be the calm in any chaos. So what do you do when something happens?
Yeah, there's a gentleman out there called Alex Hermosi that he says when he hits these pain points, I heard this a couple of years ago, he goes, what else did you expect? If you thought you were going to make an impact, if you thought you were going to be given these responsibilities of something bigger and something greater, did you think that was just going to come easily? Of course, challenges are going to come with it. And so I always think back on that. So every time you feel like you're like getting punched in the stomach, and it happens often, it's like, well, that's going to happen. If we're going to do something big, there are going to be really big wins, but there are going to be really big punches too. And so you usually I look at it and I go, it's a sign because every punch seems like it gets bigger. It's a sign that we're on that right trajectory to making bigger impacts. And that doesn't mean that it's easy or painless to get punched, but you recognize and realize this is just part of the journey. And if there is one thing I know, it's every time I've gone through something challenging in my life, I have become a better and stronger person because of it. And so I think I look at that and I just keep reflecting on this is going to make me stronger. This is going to teach me a new lesson. This is going to elevate who I am or give me more empathy if I need it or whatever it may be. But using it to understand that this is something that I can use as a lesson and this is something that's going to strengthen me is kind of the thing that I cling to in those seasons until you get through it.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. Like this is going to make me stronger, right? We know growing pains, they're painful. But if we're going to live into the founders and CEOs that we know we can be, we have to be stretched. So I'll share with you as friends and moms. So I went through a really challenging season, and my therapist, Mark, who was referred to me by a friend who had grown $1 billion company. I'm like, well, if he could be her therapist, he can be mine. And he said to me, Susan, what is the hardest thing you've ever gone through? And so I started to talk about, being abused and kidnapped as a child. And he said, okay, let's call that a 10. He's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, that being your 10, how tough is this? I'm like, a 3. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, Alisa, of what I was going through at that moment in business, that it was like a 10. And once he gave that perspective, and so
Yeah.
for everyone listening, whether it's a divorce or whether it's infidelity or whether we had a founder on here, God bless her, her daughter was diagnosed with cancer and her husband was diagnosed with cancer within a month. And
Oh
she gets
gosh.
diagnosed with cancer. There's her 10. And
Mm.
what she was saying, she was like, well, that was my 10. Everything else was
Mhm.
going to be a 1 or a 2 compared to that.
Yeah.
And when we think about that, right, that I love how you shared your perspective, because as founders, it goes back to, even as an investor in startups, I everyone has great ideas, but there are certain types of founders that are so gritty and resilient, like they're going to win no matter what, because they can shift their perspective like that.
Yeah. And that's great advice. I absolutely love that perspective too.
What I'm thinking about who you are now, polished, and you have it together, you're growing this company. If you could give yourself advice when you were first starting out, when it was Friday and you were taking PTO, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that it's going to be a wild ride and you're going to feel uncomfortable almost every day, but it is going to build you into a whole new person. And that is the journey that's worth taking. It's not how big did the company get? It's not how much money did you make, but the person that you become on the other side of it is what's worth it all. I was on a call the other day with a prospective franchise owner that's considering joining our world. And she said, "Hey, Alisa, I have to be honest with you. I'm terrified of selling. So I'm a little nervous about this idea of like, if I start a business, I have to sell." And it brought me back. And I said, "Do you know the very first time that I went and I knocked on doors when I took PTO on Friday, I was shaking when I pulled up and to go and speak to somebody because I didn't have to sell in my previous career. I was the Excel person behind a spreadsheet that didn't have to pitch why they should be working with me. But I've learned those skills. I've developed that over time. But everything to me is a skill that you can learn. And so it just comes down to understanding that you may already have this in your toolbox, but you're going to be missing this. And that's how I see it today is my toolbox is bigger now, but there are all these other opportunities and skills that I want to continue to grow and learn. And that journey of growth personally and professionally for me is what gets me so excited about being in business and doing this.
That's huge. And thank you for casting that vision, because
Yeah.
that I keep, so one of the things I do, like, because I tell everyone, the global audience, like everything about my life, so it doesn't really matter. But one of the things I started doing is when I'm having a wall-kicking moment, writing my current self a letter from my future self. And sometimes it's, Susan, it's going to be okay, right? Susan, you're going to get stronger. Susan, you're going to learn skills. Susan, the right people always show up. Prove a time when they didn't, right? And whatever that
Yeah.
is. And it's that wisdom that comes. How has technology shifted your business? I just got back, as we're doing this show, I just got back from Davos speaking at World Economic Forum. I was speaking at on agentic AI and AI has been my background in my life for almost a decade. And then when I was in my late teens, I was coding early facial recognition algorithms. So technology is shifting the landscape of every business. So how is it shifting Linden Creek?
Yeah, technology is a huge part of who we are and what we do. I think if you are sitting on your hands thinking it's not going to impact your industry or your world, you're going to miss the boat really fast. I think one of the things that interests me the most about technology today is the rate at which it's growing and adapting. So we do, and me specifically, I dive in every quarter and go, what resources and opportunities are out there in our industry today that could help us propel and be better? Because they might not be there today, but they might be there in 3 months.
That's it.
But one of the biggest things we did in technology is there really was not a system out there to help support home stagers in inventory management and everything else that we did. And so to operate our day to day, when I first started, I had an inventory management system, an invoicing system, and like 7 Excel spreadsheets to manage my operations. And it
For
would
those of you
take
who can't see me, you're not on YouTube. I'm laughing so hard because I so understand that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we've all been there and you're just like, this is painful. And something to just know what's happening in my business should not take me 3, 4 hours of every day. And so I remember like my directors that were in charge of sales and management were like, Alisa, we need to hire an admin. And I was like, forget an admin. This should not be this hard. And so we built our own software company about 2 years ago that does everything that you need it to do all in one for a home stager. So it manages where your inventory is, it handles your invoicing for your clients, it is your CRM, it automates the email process so that you're actually doing the things that matter because people and human interaction is huge. That's never going to go away. But you should focus your time doing that, not the administrative tasks behind the scenes that don't actually move the needle but are necessary for survival. And so for us, technology is huge. It's where can we bring it in to streamline something silly we're doing so that we can have the biggest impact in front of our clients.
And that's often where technology comes from, great technology. It's like, I want something to solve this
Yes.
problem. Like even with what we're building at the pause, it was like going through perimenopause and menopause, I just wanted someone to tell me what time to go to bed, how much exercise to get today, what to do to ameliorate all of those symptoms, right? And it's like that's where it comes from. I have a question for you, like just a deeply personal one. Like you're so
Sure.
driven, right? The company, all of the things you're doing. What's something that is on your bucket list personally?
Gosh, on my bucket list personally. I do want to travel more one day. I think these last couple years as we've grown and we've scaled, we've gotten the opportunity to travel internationally for business purposes, which has been amazing and so rewarding. And I think it's opened my eyes to see the value of what you learn when you force yourself into different cultures and experiences. And so prioritizing that and finding time to carve out to grow. Um, Honestly, from that perspective, is something that gets me excited about a new journey for us in these years to come.
So where do you want to go?
Um, right now, I think the nearest bucket list is we want to finally hit Spain as a family and get the kids involved with just true immersion, not just like coming here on vacation and seeing the pretty things and going to the beaches, but the opportunity to really be part of the culture for a more extended period of time.
That, well, I'll share founder to founder, woman to woman.
Yes.
Um, I spent many years building my last company, didn't travel. The last time we took a family vacation was Israel 2018. And so coming into this year, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't even recognize myself. I'm the crazy person who went undercover in brothels to rescue kids in Cambodia for years. I did all sorts of stuff and I've traveled all over the world. And I didn't I didn't even know who I was because work became my everything. So this year I poured myself a glass of wine. I'm like, screw it. Booked a trip to Rome for my kids. Then, when I was making my list of what I wanted to manifest, I was like, I haven't been to Greece. It's one country. So I said, but I'm going to go to Greece, but I'm going to get paid to go to Greece. And literally the very next week, a company reached out to invite me to come and train their attorneys in AI fundamentals in Athens at their retreat. And so now I'm getting paid to go to
Amazing.
Greece. Then I was like, I haven't been to Kenya. And then this girlfriend reaches out and goes, we're going on a girls' retreat to Kenya. Do you want to go? I'm like, heck yes. And I think like just having this coffee chat, cocktail chat, the time never comes. As you know, we've got to create
Mhm.
time. And one of the, I think the greatest things that I ever chose to do was definitely travel with the kids, like go to Asia, go to Europe, go everywhere and anywhere because we don't get the time back. And now that my oldest one is 28 and my youngest is 16, I'm like, I have to rally them even more
Yeah.
because they have their lives. And so that's my invitation to you, sister. Create that time.
I love it. Thank you. That is some of the best advice.
Well, on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, we get to give each other advice. My final question for you is I'm looking at this trajectory and all the things you've created. And you said, I wrote a quote, um, really about celebrating your wins. So at what level is the next celebration for your company? When you go,
Yeah.
yes, I'm going to Spain for a month, y'all. We'll see you. Like, what is that? What?
So when I made the decision to franchise, the research that I did is like it doesn't really work if you franchise and have 5 locations. You need to kind of do something bigger because economies of scale and impact and all these things. And so as I started devising this plan of I think I'm going to pull a trigger on franchising, I always used to say we're going to sell 96 locations in 5 years. And everyone looked at me like I was crazy. I had actually just started dating my husband now at the time. And I think it was like our second date. I was like, I'm going to sell 96 locations. I had one. It's like, I'm going to sell 96 locations in 5 years. And he was like, oh, you cute, dumb blonde. That's a little bit crazy. I don't know what I signed up for. And on my team on day one, we're going to sell 96 locations in 5 years. That to me is the next like massive celebration. It's wild to say like, we very intentionally started slow and built a really strong foundation and framework to set our franchise owners up for success and learn all the lessons before we scaled. And we're in a season now where we just kind of turn on the gas and it starts to happen very organically and naturally now. And so we are on track to hit that goal of within that 5 years hitting 96. And that will be a really massive win for me.
I love that. You, Alisa, are an inspiration, and
Thank you so much.
I would encourage. Where are we at as of this moment between now and 96? I
Yeah.
can't keep up. I did try and research. I'm like, where is she at with this?
We are 20, so we are a fifth of the way here. We've got a long ways to go. Ask me again in 6 months, and I'm gonna have a different answer for you by a long shot. But we are on the path to a lot of exciting things over here.
So if someone's listening and they're interested in applying discovery to have a franchise, how do they do that?
Yeah, check us out online. Our website is linden-creek.com/franchise, and you can explore franchise opportunities, what states we're offering it in, and more information about our program.
Awesome. Let's get you to 96 and get you on vacation, love.
Sounds great.
Well, Alisa, thank you so much for being on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. Everyone listening, if this episode has touched your heart, like give us a 5-star review. We are power girls and we work. Like give us a 5-star review, share it with your friends, drop a comment on social. And if you are serious, and I'm not talking curious, if you're serious about being one of the 96, who knows, maybe there's an opportunity to get to go on a team trip to Spain. I don't know. Make sure you do check out linden-creek.com/franchise. Alisa, thanks again for being on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship.
Thanks so much for having me, Susan. This is great.